Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining. Let's just give it 2 more minutes and we are going to start. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much, you all, for joining this webinar. My name is Mehwish Khan, and I'm here a part of the organization team here at MVUP, Metro Vancouver United for Palestine. And I have been involved with coordinating some of our local community actions. And I'm really honored to be hosting this evening session. In today's webinars, Gaza, Palestine, and Iran imperialism resistance and changing paradigm gives us the chance to discuss the genocide happening against Palestinians in Gaza. In the larger context of global politics, from the Palestinian struggle of self-determination against the Israeli Zionism to the wider forces of resistance against US imperialist attempts to dominate West Asia. Today's webinar is organized by Metro Vancouver United for Palestine, MVUP, which started almost 1 year ago with the aim of bringing together groups and individuals of all faiths and backgrounds and ideologies in united, consistent action for Palestine. Today's webinar is a part of MVUP's 2 weeks of action, marking 2 years of genocide and 2 years of resistance. This has included our weekly rallies and marches, and also the poetry night, a film and discussion night, a walk for Gaza that included a banner drop off the Cambie Street Bridge and a banner drop in Stanley Park. All of these events and actions have been an important opportunity to join together in solidarity with Palestine against war and genocide, and to strengthen our continued commitment to organize beyond ceasefire for an end to the siege of Gaza, the release of all Palestinian prisoners, and to end the attacks on West Bank, and most importantly, the liberation and self-determination for Palestine. So as for today's program, we have 3 speakers here, and our speakers, we will have time for questions and answers as well. All of you people are welcome to comment in the chat as long as your comments are respectful. Any disrespectful comments or attempts to disrupt this event in this evening will not be tolerated, as we are here for a positive and constructive event. If you would like to ask any question, please use the Q&A box at the bottom, the question and answer box of your screen, and I will read out your questions for you for our speakers at the end of the presentations. And before I introduce our speakers to you this evening, I want to remind everyone, as we are joining in defense for the Palestinian struggle for their land and self-determination, we must also remember that the land that many of us is on in indigenous land, and we stand in solidarity with the struggle of indigenous nations from Turtle Island to Palestine, from where I am joining from. I am on the unceded territories of Musqueam, Squamish, and Solitudes Nation. And I ask everyone to take a moment to recognize our responsibility to the struggle of indigenous nations, wherever you're joining from. So our first speaker today is Dr. Shiva. Dr. Shiva Olyaei is a Peter A. Allard School from Law of Alumna with PhD from UBC, and is a dedicated faculty member and program chair in law and public and social justice. I will reintroduce Dr. Shiva. Dr. Shiva Olyaei is a Peter A. Allard School of Law alumna with a PhD from UBC. is a dedicated faculty member and program chair in law and public policy at Kwantlen Polytechnic University. Her work bridges law and policy and social justice, grounded in counter-hegemonic thought and anti-colonial feminist legal theory. Dr. Shiva's presentation is titled From the Belly of the Beast, Palestine, Imperial, Contradictions, and the Politics of Resistance.
Thank you, dear Mahush. Thank you so much for your introduction. So I'm trying to share my PowerPoints here and ensure that it's working. So just a little bit of try. I think it's working.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Peace and salams, everyone. It's Thursday night. The week is almost behind you, but something in you, awake, searching, unwilling to settle, brought you here. I am grateful for that spark, for your curiosity, for the hope that still insists on showing up. Out of respect for your right to know, let me share a bit about my positionality. I'm Dr. Shiva, an Iranian immigrant from West Asia. In the empire's map, it is called the Middle East. I'm an independent academic, not affiliated with or representing any institution or group. I am very grateful to live and learn on the unceded territory of Muslim people. And for me, that gratitude is a verb to always arrive with humility, tell the truth, and share the work. I come from a country that is reduced to headlines, Iran, a nation that has endured wars, survived coups and color revolutions piggybacked by Western empires, where genuine cries for justice were real, but their momentum have been hijacked and repurposed. A country that has withstood the slow violence of sanctions, economic terrorism, disguised as foreign policy, all engineered by the world's most liberal democracies to quietly claim 38 million lives across 66 nations. My country is the one where scholars are celebrated when they leave, when they contribute their brilliance to the empire's laboratories, and assassinated when they dare to stay and serve their own people. The shorthand for Iran, as told to the world, is danger, never dignity. Yeah, they are right. And how terribly inconsiderate of Iran to park itself right in the middle of such a peaceful neighborhood, surrounded by those friendly, freedom-loving US military bases. Iran, don't you understand that empire has other plans? Geopolitics, couldn't you become more cooperative, not to plant Iran in the heartland? So yes, Iran is treated as a problem, a rogue regime, not because it lacks civilization or culture, but because it refuses to trade submission for survival. In a world choreographed by American power and policies, Iran's greatest offense is not the enrichment of uranium, but it is the audacity to be ungovernable by the empire. The foot soldiers of empire love to call our resistance too flawed, too radical, too ideological, as if our liberation must earn a moral pass from the very power that built our cages. Some even paint Iran as a moral ideal, but this is not my point. I'm here to recognize its strategic necessity, a nation that, with all its contradictions, still refuses to kneel before the machinery of domination. From Gaza to Beirut, from Sana'a to Tehran, resisting, even when resistance costs everything. Here is another truth. In a country that resists empire while wrestling with its own contradictions over freedom, faith, and gender on one hand, and oligarchy and neoliberal decay on the other, I went to law school. And for all my legal education, I was taught almost nothing about colonialism and the colonial nature of international law. My childhood memories were full of Palestine. Even the street I grew up was named the Children of Gaza. My world was filled with images of children, martyrs, uprisings, but I wasn't given the tools to connect the dots. It was sorrow without analyses. It was tragedy without causality. And in that silence, I became numb with my own ignorance. Until 15 years ago, I began to reclaim the education I've never received. I reached out to professors, elders, organizers in kitchens, in classrooms, in picket lines. They gave me questions that wouldn't let me sleep. Why are Canada, the US, the UK who they are? Why are Iran, Yemen, Palestine, Venezuela, and others cast as perpetual problems? Who extracts and who provides? Who benefits when our tax dollars here feed endless wars, fund genocide, dispossessions, and fossil extractions, while our children here learn to say wildfire smoke before summer? But law school taught me the language of right, but it was people who taught me the grammar of power, and power taught me a simple lesson. Silence is complicity. Gender and settler colonialism is not over there. They are a system, local and global, past and present, sustained by policy, by profit, and our permission. But I'm not here to perform virtue. I hope to practice responsibility because I'm part of these people. I'm part of these people. Look at this slide. My goal is that we carry this inquiry together with accuracy, with courage, and with respect to one another. Let's name the feeling many of us carry: overwhelmed, unsure on what to do in the face of all these atrocities. That's human, but it is our inaction which keeps injustice alive. And we can refuse that role. So tonight isn't about performing correctness. It's about something far riskier, seeking historical accuracy and ethical clarity. When we face where we stall, grounded in history, and choose responsibility, we reclaim both agency and our dignity. So this conversation examines the Palestinian liberation struggle not as an isolated moral question, everyone, but as the central contradiction with global imperialism. Because the mirror of Palestine reveals how empire operates, how it adapts, and how even nations that call themselves peacekeepers become complicit in the machinery of domination. Canada is no exception. A country aligned with NATO wars, silent in the face of genocide, and selective in its humanitarianism. So let's widen the lens from Turtle Island to Palestine and see that colonial logic, the logic that hasn't vanished, it has evolved. So tonight, our task is to call things by their names, to refuse the comfort of neutrality, and to understand that humanitarian tragedy is not the same as the colonial struggle, Palestine is not a crisis to be pitied, it's a struggle to be joined. In 1947, Canada sat in the United Nations Special Committee on Palestine. The body asked to recommend what should happen after the British Mandate. The Supreme Court of Justice Ivan Rand helped shape the majority report that recommended partition. He used the language of that era, calling the region an otherwise darkened section of humanity in need of Western beacon. In practice, Palestinian voices were not included on equal terms, while Zionist representatives were committedly heard. Lester Pearson, the Canadian Prime Minister of that time, then lobbied hard for that partition. He described Israel as an outpost of civilization, the Western civilization in the Middle East. He referred to his Sunday school imagery, Palestine as the Holy Land and Israel as the beacon of light in a supposedly darkened side of the world. The result was the UN General Assembly Resolution 181 in November 1947. Partition into Jewish and Arab state, with Jerusalem remained under international administration. Canada voted in favor, while many countries, including the Iran during Pahlavi era, advocated for a unitary state or a confederation that would preserve the territorial integrity of Palestine and protect the right of all its inhabitants, Arabs and Jews alike. Pearson lobbying, of course, paved the way to the resolution, gave international legitimacy to partition, even though Palestinians originally rejected it as a violation of self-determination. Pearson was hailed by many in Canada as Balfour of Canada, but what was the logic behind that praise? Palestine and Palestinian land basically was used as the stage where the West tried to make up for Europe's own crimes, while Canada congratulated itself on a new peacekeeping role. But Canada's peacekeeping was never meant to be neutral. It was designed to discipline Indigenous resistance, both in Palestine and here in Turtle Island. Do we see the pattern? Take land from people, divide and redistribute, call it progress or order, and in the process push aside and deny Indigenous Palestinian self-determination? Here is the hard mirror. Canada could celebrate Jewish safety abroad while still allowing anti-Semitism rooted in its own European colonial structure to persist at home. Canada turned away over 900 Jewish refugees fleeing Nazi Germany. The apology came much later in 2018. Look at this phrase, the chilling phrase linked to senior immigration official Frederick Blair, which perfectly captured Canada's policy towards Jewish refugees during World War II. Even Prime Minister Mackenzie King, his diary revealed that Euro-Christian colonial attitude was explicit about this case. We would have riots if we agreed to a policy that admitted numbers of Jews. Canada later interned hundreds of Jewish refugees who were transported from Britain, put them behind barbed wire as enemy aliens, despite their refugee status. And for decades, we've seen vandalism of synagogues and Jewish cemeteries here in Canada. But let's put Canada's record at home beside its foreign posture. Abroad, Canada helped design and defend partition, dress it up in language of beacons and darkness at home. However, it shuts its doors. The pattern is what we might call colonial convenience. For Britain and Canada, that convenience meant pushing out the people they called a problem, Jewish communities, out of sight, out of mind, and supporting and facilitating their relocation somewhere else and keeping them there by all means necessary. Partition was the blueprint. Canada's role in that blueprint helped clear the path for what Palestinians called Nakba, Arabic for catastrophe. During this ongoing process, Indigenous Palestinians' dispossession turned into policies, UN resolutions, laws, and practices. They normalized removal and make the Palestinians' return impossible. Even David Ben-Gurion admired the US for displacing the savages and spoke of aggressive defense by expulsion of the residents. Chaim Weizmann, he said, we are planting a new people in the country, just like how Lord Cromwell, the misogynist Lord Cromwell, put the empire's lexicon in plain sight. Civilization must unfortunately has its own victims. Does that sound familiar? It should. Here on Turtle Island, Indigenous communities were forced into starvation by government policies to clear the plains. Different land, same pattern. Indigenous death explained away as an unfortunate necessity. If that keeps us up tonight, it's doing its job, not to punish us, but to wake us. Now, let's talk about Canada's favorite brand, peacekeeping. Right after 1947, Canada helped stand up the United Nations Truce Supervising Organizations, the UN's first peacekeeping mission to monitor ceasefire after the Arab-Israeli war. On paper, it watched a truce, but in practice, they normalized the new borders. During the Suez Crisis, Pearson again proposed the United Nations Emergency Force and later received, guess what? A Nobel Peace Prize. It was marketed as a diplomatic genius. On the ground, the UN role was to keep the colonial order in place. It was never about challenging it. It was about managing Indigenous resistance on the ground. Egyptians initially, they rejected Canadian troops because they looked too British. It was a small moment that pointed to a larger truth, everyone. Sometimes the uniform changes, the project doesn't. Pearson proposed partition and make it into something completely permanent. And instead of restoring Palestinian sovereignty, they locked Israel territorial gains. Occupation was renamed as truce. Counterinsurgency was also rebranded as peacekeeping. If that sounds familiar, it is. Look at the Trump proposal for peace. Look at Turtle Island. Peace on reserves was long policed. Pass systems, checkpoints, Indian Act governance. Those are the tools of empire to manage this possession. They have never meant to end it. At the very moment that Canada was building its image as a multicultural peacekeeper, it was also quietly admitting Nazi collaborators and alleged war criminals. In the 1980s, Deschedin Commission confirmed that Nazi war criminals, including members of the Waffen-SS Galicia division, had entered and lived in Canada. Decades later, in 2022, Canadian MPs gave a standing ovation to a Galicia veteran. Meanwhile, despite laws prohibiting enlistment in foreign armies, Canadians who joined or recruited for the IDF faced no charges, as the RCMP framed their action as intelligence gathering, not crimes. Once again, at the UN, Canada opposed calling the Sabra and Shatila massacre a genocide, a stance that once again helped shield a far-right, fascist, phalangist militia, which led to Vancouver rallies in 1982 to condemn both the massacre and Ottawa's posture. The bottom line is that Canada's record of Palestine fascism, on anti-Muslim racism, on anti-Semitism is contested, contradictory, and far from the story it tells about itself. And we can't forget that anti-Semitism is not an imported problem. It's a deeply Western one, a European crime across centuries. In fact, for much of history, the Muslim world sheltered Jewish communities while Europe expelled, ghettoized, and massacred them. In recent decades, once again, Canada has shifted more towards shielding Israel. In the UN, ICC, ICJ, also licensing arms sales. A century ago, Arthur Balfour said the quiet part loud. It was not true that man in Central Africa was created equal to Europeans. Today, that same logic is just dressed up with new words, security and counterterrorism. And here at home, when Indigenous people defend their land, it is criminalized. Then corporate and state force is celebrated as law and order. So when we hear peace, we need to ask, peace for whom and at what price? Peace to them is obedience without resistance. Peace to me is resistance until liberation. And Gaza brought that consequences into full view as the most concentrated site of slaughter and engineered starvation on earth. This isn't collateral, it's the system way beyond genocide. It's an omnicide, a full display of ritual sacrifice, the killings of people's whole life support systems, homes, schools, medicine, memory, futures. The US envoy Tom Barrack's word put colonial mindset in plain sight. America imagines the Middle East as the land to own, but they forget that some nations were not born of colonial borders, and they will not be raised by them. Friends, isn't it the same architecture? Just a different facade? We have seen or read this before. Residential schools, starvation on reserves, whole sacrifice zones sold as civilization and development. And when the harm became undeniable, what do? An apology that will come 100 years later? Or we hold reconciliation commissions, not tribunals, not the ICC. And if international courts are only meant for the so-called black and brown predators. My fellow travelers, my friends in justice, if some of these lands hard, stay with me. Let the sting fall where it should, because that sting belongs to history, not to one another. So let the heat fall where it should on the machinery of power, not the people on this webinar. From the colonial partition that divides lands to UN votes and export licenses that arm the injustice, this country helped build that frame and still helps to shield its outcome. So our task is clear and shared. It isn't to carry guilt, but to step into responsibility. People act when they believe action works, and it does, especially for people living in a country whose policies matter. Because boycotts move institutions, letters shift votes, campaigns freezes contracts. Also, let's remember not to confuse this work with charity. It is decomplicity, the courage to refuse the comfort of being bystanders. Our power lives in collective action. So let us practice solidarity, not saviorism. Let's follow the lead of Palestinians and our indigenous siblings who have long shown what courage truly looks like. So this is a call to all of us, every voice, every hand, every heart that refuses to look away. If you are a marcher, walk and make the streets remember. If you're a truth keeper, speak and let no lie stand unchallenged. If you're a culture bearer, paint, sing, write, breathe color and story back into the world gone gray. If you're a teacher, a caregiver, a prayer holder, nourish, guide, bless, feed the people who dare to hope. And if you're still learning or still unlearning, use that humility as resistance. Talk, question, listen, and rebuild, because every role matters, from the kitchen to the classrooms, from the pulpits to picket lines. Let solidarity be our shared language and courage our shared practice. From Turtle Island to Tehran, from Gaza to the heart of wherever justice is demanded. And a word for a warrior in the room. Some of you are holding a hard question. When harm is relentless, what about armed resistance? Especially now when Palestine and Palestinians are facing a literal genocide. There's a part of us that longs to confront oppression head on, to protect the vulnerable, to fight for freedom. And there are others who feel equally called to nonviolent path. They believe that justice must walk barefoot, not armed. Here's where I begin. I was raised under bombs and missiles raining down on Iran, funded and armed by the Western-backed Saddam regime in Iraq. But I'm not under bombardments now, and neither are you. We don't live the daily terror of Gaza or the hunger of Yemen or the bloodshed in south of Lebanon. The fact that we can debate resistance tactics is itself a privilege. You are fully aware that international law recognizes the right of peoples under colonial domination and foreign occupation to resist, even though armed struggle, so long as they remain bound by humanitarian law, by distinction, proportionality, and protection of civilians. Let us not join the chorus that scold people under fire for how they survive. Let us not become the voices that carry that colonial logic forward. Here is our one single task: to refuse complicity, to reject the language of neutrality, and to remember that every act of survival under occupation is itself a form of just resistance. We know that our strength is not in sameness, but in weaving together all our differences into one fabric of resistance. The work of justice needs every voice, every hand, every heartbeat. Some will march, some will sing, some will teach, some will feed, some will pray, some will heal, and yes, some will fight. Together, they form one struggle for life, dignity, and liberation. Free Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shiva Olyaei, for that powerful and thought-provoking presentation. You have really highlighted how deeply it's interconnected the imperialism resistance are, especially in the Palestinian context. We really appreciate your insight and the way you frame the struggle from the legal and social justice perspective, not only for the Palestinians, but also for the indigenous people of Turtle Island. Next up, we have Dr. Hossein Renani. Dr. Hossein Renani is an organizer with Metro Vancouver United for Palestine, MVUP, and he's also a member of Iranian Canadian Congress. For today, Dr. Hossein's presentation is titled as Iran, Revolution, Resistance, Sacrifice, and Triumph. Let's welcome Dr. Hossein Renani. Dr. Hossein, you're on mute, I guess. You're on mute.
Yes, thank you, Mayvesh, and thank you all for joining and tuning into our webinar. The talk by Dr. Olyaei was excellent, and it's a very hard act to follow. My presentation is not going to be nearly as well-polished and well-prepared as hers, but I want to take you over a journey of my country and how it's connected to the struggle that we are all fighting for against Zionism, against colonialism, imperialism, and for freedom and humanity. So the title is Iran, Revolution, Resistance, Sacrifice, and Triumph. And I think it is crucial for all audience to understand the history of a nation, of a country, so that when they see actions and reactions and stances, they have that background and they can better understand where that nation is coming from. So at the beginning of the talk, I have a bit of history of Iran, and then we'll get into the more recent events. So as some of you may know, Iran used to be called Persia, and it traces back to about 550 years before Christ. And at the time, it was essentially the Persian Empire was called the Achaemenid Empire, and it was the largest empire known to man at that time. Cyrus the Great was the founder of that empire, and he has many advances to his name, one of them being the Cyrus Cylinder, which is often considered the first declaration of human rights. And his successors, for example, Darius I and Xerxes I, expanded and consolidated that empire and built monumental architecture and also established very sophisticated administration systems. So on the map here, you see essentially the extent of the Persian Empire at the time. And the official language of Iran since 24,000 years ago was Persian, also known as Farsi or Parsi. Now, if you want to have an idea of...
Sorry, Hossein?
Yes?
We are not seeing the same screen, I think, as you. We still only see your introductory slide. You might want to reshare.
Okay, let's see.
You might have to close it and reshare. Oh, there we are. Perfect. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Thanks for that heads up. Okay. So you see the full screen now?
Yes.
Yes, we can see it.
Perfect, thank you. So here you see the extent of the Persian Empire about 2,500 years ago. And essentially, if you map the outline of the Persian Empire on today's map, you'll see that it included not only modern day Iran, which is this area, but pretty much Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, all of Palestine, Jordan, parts of Egypt, parts of Iraq, Kuwait, United Arab Emirates, Turkey, Azerbaijan, Georgia, parts of Pakistan, and some other parts of the world. So it was really huge. And it's because of that shared history that we identify with the people of the region. Now, Persepolis was the capital of the Persian Empire at about 518 BCE, when we still have the remains of this Persepolis in the province of Shiraz in Iran. It's really breathtaking stuff. If you ever have a chance to visit Iran, I would highly recommend to visit these building sites. The Cyrus Cylinder is the first declaration of human rights, which was inscribed by the order of Cyrus the Great at around 539 before Christ, and it was issued after Cyrus conquered Babylon. And on this cylinder, essentially, there are details of how Cyrus restored sanctuaries and returned deported people and their gods to their original homes and protected the city of Babylon. It emphasizes religious tolerance and the freedom of displaced peoples. And ironically, the Cyrus Cylinder is currently on display at the British Museum. So as all of you may know, one of the things that the British have been pretty good at is stealing other people's stuff. And so this is one of those examples where a Persian artifact is at the British Museum. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the interconnection between Iran and Islam. So the common religion of the Persian Empire at the time of the Achaemenid dynasty was Zoroastrianism, which was centered on the worship of one single God and moral responsibility, truthfulness, and purity. Other religions also included Buddhism, Judaism, and later on Christianity, and they were freely practiced in the Persian Empire. After the news of the revelation of Islam and the Holy Quran to Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and in the 7th century, the news reached Persia, and Salman the Persian, or otherwise called Salman Farsi, joined the Prophet and converted to Islam and became one of the Prophet's most closest companions and confidants. The message of Islam shortly after spread far and wide, and Islam gradually became the common religion in Persia. And this led to the emergence of a distinct Persian Islamic civilization, which later on played a major role in shaping Islamic sciences, philosophy, architecture, literature, and governance. The Persian Islamic scientists not only progressed Islamic sciences, but also influenced European thought during the Renaissance and modern sciences. And I have listed some of the pioneering Persian Islamic scientists, for example, Avicenna, or otherwise known as Ibn Sina, who is the father of early modern medicine. Al-Khwarizmi, who is the father of algebra and algorithm, Al-Razi, who was a pioneering physician, chemist, and philosopher, Omar al-Khayyam, who was a renowned mathematician, astronomer, and poet, and many more. And here I have some pictures of modern-day Iran with some of those architectures from the confluence of Persian culture and Islam. So this is in my city of Isfahan in Iran, very beautiful square. This is the shrine of the 8th Imam in Shia Islam in Mashhad of Iran. This is another beautiful mosque in Shiraz. Another beautiful architecture of a mosque, and this is Siosepol at the city of Isfahan. And you can see very common themes in terms of architecture in these photos. Now, over time, the boundaries of the Persian Empire shrank, and we got to World War I, where Persia, although it declared neutrality, it was invaded and occupied by the British and by Russian forces. And here you can see essentially how the partition of Iran was done at the time of World War II. Foreign invaders really turned Persia into a battleground and created the Great Persian Famine, which killed about 11 million Iranians, about half of the total population of Iran at the time, which, as you may imagine, it's totally devastating. After World War I, Britain helped a military officer called Reza Pahlavi, who later changed his name to Reza Pahlavi, or the first Shah, to carry out a coup and to take power as a king. And king in Farsi means Shah. So when you hear Shah, it really means a king. And that Shah was installed to essentially advance British interest in Iran. And while Iran was the domestic name of the Persian Empire and Persia for over 2,400 years, Reza Pahlavi decided to change the country's international name from Persia to Iran in 1935. And this is a very common theme that many countries have different domestic names and international names. For example, China internationally is called China, but in China people call it Zhanggu, or in Germany, for example, it's Deutschland, but English is Germany. India is India in international terminology, but inside India, people call it Bharat, and so on. And so for Persia, it was always internationally known as Persia, and inside the country, it was referred to as Iran. But in 1935, this installed Shah decided to change that international name. And I think that has created a disconnect in terms of linguistic between the heritage of Persia and the name which is currently portrayed internationally. During World War II, Iran again declared neutrality because these brutal wars were really European wars, fought in Europe and in other places. But still, again, Iran was invaded by the Britain and the Soviet Union because it was at a critical geopolitical and geostrategic location, and they wanted to use Iran as a corridor for the war and also use Iranian resources. So this invasion, as you may imagine, was very disruptive to the Iranian people. Food and natural resources were plundered by these invaders. And in 1941, the invaders ousted Reza Pahlavi and instead installed his young son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, the next Shah, who was even easier to control and could better advance the interest of the British. And here you see essentially the partition of Iran during World War II. So this north part was again controlled to some extent by Soviet Union, and the oil-rich southern parts were really invaded and occupied and plundered by the British. After World War II, we had a period of democracy, and under the newly installed Shah, still much of Iranian oil and natural resources was taken by Britain and the United States until in 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh became a democratically elected prime minister and an icon of Iran's democracy and resistance to colonial powers. Mossadegh naturalized Iranian oil and instituted radical measures such as social security, land reform, and wealth redistribution. The nationalization of oil took it really out of British hand, and it was celebrated by the people, but obviously the British were really angry about this move. So they began to impose economic sanctions on Iran, organized a boycott of Iranian oil, and also they intensified their measures using economic crisis and scarcity, and also launched CIA propaganda machine to portray Mossadegh as a form of dictator. And as we go through these terms, sanctions, dictators, you see a familiar theme that anytime there's a leader in a country who wants to stand up to colonialism and imperialism, these are their go-to tools. They impose sanctions, they do coups, and they call the person dictator so that inside the country they can cause unrest. And unfortunately, this tactic worked. So in 1953, American CIA and British MI6 orchestrated a coup and overthrew Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh. Subsequently, they brought back the young Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who had briefly fled the country. They restored his authority over natural resources and reversed Mohammad Mossadegh's nationalization and anti-colonial achievements. And the operation against Mossadegh, which was called Operation Ajax, orchestrated by CIA and MI6, was so successful that they used it as a model, and they are continuing to use it to this day in different countries to better advance the interest of imperialists and colonialists. The rule of Shah continued until the Iranian Revolution in 1979, which was a transformative uprising by millions of Iranians. So here you see the Freedom Tower, and that's the picture that I had on the starting slide, where flags of Palestine and Iran or Lebanon were projected on it. Now you see the same Freedom Tower in this picture, where millions of Iranians had come out for the Iranian Revolution to celebrate the revolution and support the leader and the new form of governance there. So shortly after the revolution, there was a referendum, and in terms of the form of governance, because the revolution was highly influenced by Islamic thought for freedom and justice and equality. Islamic Republic of Iran was chosen as the form of resistance as the form of governance overwhelmingly by Iranian people. And the leader of the revolution obviously was Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini. And Ayatollah is a term that you may have heard. It really means a very high-ranking clergy in Shia Islam, something which could be similar to a top bishop in Christianity. Now, fueled by widespread this revolution was really fueled by widespread dissatisfaction with the Shah's authoritarian rule and the Savak torture practices, which were really learned from CIA, Mossad, and MI6. Also Shah's Western ties and socio-economic inequality. And this revolution united various groups, including those with Islamic resistance mindset, leftists, students, and workers against the monarchy. And it led to the overthrow of the Shah and the monarchy system and brought the Islamic Republic of Iran to the country. About 1 year after the revolution, because it was really a slap in the face of colonialism and imperialism, and it could threaten the entire region to liberation from the puppets that the imperialists and colonialists had put in the countries. The West gave its full support to Saddam Hussein for Iraq to launch an invasion on Iran. And that war took 8 years and many lives until it ended. Saddam Hussein wanted to curb the influence of the Iran's Islamic Revolution, seize control of the oil-rich regions of Iran, and also assert dominance in the Persian Gulf. And Iraq used conventional weapons, chemical weapons, and biochemical weapons, fully supported and provided by the West, by the US, by the UK, by Germany, against the Iranian people. And at the same time, these countries prevented Iran from condemning these violations of international law at the United Nations, and even were not allowing Iranians to buy masks to protect their civilians against these chemical attacks. Despite the initial Iraqi advances, Iran's soldiers and volunteers repelled the invaders and maintained the territorial integrity of Iran. And during 8 years of war, more than 1 million Iranians were martyred and injured to defend the country. And here you see the picture of a young soldier who is really a volunteer inspired by the revolution, and he has a picture of Ayatollah Khomeini on his gun. After the revolution, there have been many developments and advances in Iran in the lives of ordinary Iranians in terms of sciences, economy, literacy, healthcare, and all of that, which are too many to list in a short presentation. But just in terms of education, there have been monumental advances. For example, here we see a picture of the late Maryam Mirzakhani, who is the only lady who has won the Fields Medal, which is the highest honor and award in mathematics. And she was born, raised, and educated in Iran. Since and after the revolution in Iran, Iran has always supported liberation movements in many parts of the country, regardless of what the interest or really the commonalities in terms of religion is. Iran has supported the African National Congress and Nelson Mandela in their fight against the apartheid in South Africa. And Nelson Mandela has been very explicit in acknowledging the support from Iran. Iran has supported openly and proudly the struggle of Palestinian people against the Zionist evil regime of Israel. Iran, from the beginning, has supported Yasser Arafat and also various resistant movements. And here you see some pictures of Yasser Arafat with Ayatollah Khamenei, the first leader of the Iranian Revolution, and also later on with Ayatollah Khamenei, who is the second and the current leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, with Ismail Haniyeh, the leader of the political leader of Hamas, who was martyred in Iran during the inauguration of the last Iranian president, Pezeshkian. Iran has supported and helped the Lebanese resistance to repel the Zionist enemy from Lebanon. And here you see a picture of Ayatollah Khomeini with the late martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah and General Soleimani. And Iran has also paid a heavy price for its principled stance. You see here a picture of martyr General Qasem Soleimani, who really repelled the Western-backed ISIS terrorists from West Asia, from Iraq, from Afghanistan, from Syria, and really neutralized the CIA operation Timber Sycamore, which was designed to collapse the state of Syria and make it into a non-state, really, and be occupied by the terrorists and the Zionist regime. And until he was alive, that could not be done. But a few years later, Trump, during his first term, ordered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. And after that, we've seen over the past year or so that Syria has fallen in the hands of the ISIS and Al-Qaeda terrorists and has been really broken down into territories controlled by Israel, controlled by Turkey, controlled by the US, and the remaining part, which is a small part, controlled by these terrorists. And here you see essentially a picture from the funeral of Qasem Soleimani in Tehran. And again, you have a picture of the Freedom Tower in Iran, and you can gauge the number of people and the emotion that the population in Iran had with respect to Qasem Soleimani. And other sacrifices that Iran has paid within the past 2 years after launching the True Promise 1 operation against the Israeli terrorist regime. What we had was that the helicopter of President Ibrahim Raisi and Foreign Minister Abdullahian was in a suspicious manner downed, essentially, and we lost a great president and a great foreign minister at that time. Other attempts to oppose the principled stance of Iran and its attempt to maintain sovereignty and independence have been maximum pressure sanctions imposed by pretty much every single United States president, and also all of these vassal regimes in North America, Europe, and beyond. And here on this, we have essentially one good book if you're interested in how sanctions work. It's The Art of Sanctions, written by Richard Nephew, which really helps you understand how these sanctions are precisely engineered and designed to really hurt the people to the point that they rebel and get really to a point of high dissatisfaction from their governments, even though the source of the suffering is from those who impose these sanctions. And also, as Dr. Olyaei referred to, there have also been many attempts at color revolutions and unrest in Iran. And here you see a picture of one of these episodes from a few years ago. And through all of these, Iran has stayed strong and proud. Until less than maybe 4 months ago, in June, we had a direct military attack by the Israeli terrorist regime on Iran, where it was completely illegal, and they assassinated many top generals and scientists, and also more than 1,000 civilians, many of them women and children, as usual with the Israeli terrorist regime. And here you see a picture of some of these martyrs. Now, Iran was successful in regaining its deterrence against the Israeli terrorist regime and other enemies. And just so you have a better understanding of how difficult it was to achieve this deterrence, Iran developed the missile capability under full sanctions, essentially. So it's a really domestic development. And for Iranian missiles to reach the Israeli enemy, they had to pass through maybe 7 or 8 lines of air defenses from the family dictatorships around the Persian Gulf region all the way to Jordan, Syria, and to land in Israel. And Iranian missiles were successful in hitting the Israeli regime really hard and punishing it to the point that they begged their daddy, the US empire, to beg for a ceasefire. And the Iranians didn't start the war and did not want to continue it unnecessarily. So they accepted the ceasefire. But as we know, it's a very fragile ceasefire. And we are all concerned about what the future developments are going to be. But this is a short story of how Iran has maintained its strength, has sacrificed greatly, and has always stayed with the resistance and liberation and principles of justice, freedom, and humanity for all oppressed peoples of the world. And I'm happy to support that struggle in the smallest ways I can. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Hossein, so much for your presentation. I would really say it was a really nice presentation. You prepared it very well. It was very informative, and I'm very sure that all of us, we have learned today a lot about Iran, the Iranian culture, the architecture, the science, and also the Iranian support for Palestinians and for Lebanon. We really appreciate. And thank you so much, Dr. Hossein, for your time and teaching us so much about Iran. So next up, we have our next speaker, Janine Solanki. So Janine here today. Janine is an organizer with Metro Vancouver United for Palestine, and she's a coordinating committee member of Canada-wide Peace and Justice Network. And so for today, Janine's presentation is titled as The Politics of Imperialism, Palestinian Struggle, and Our Perspective. Let all of us welcome Janine Solanki.
Thank you very much, and a big thank you to both of our previous speakers who have made my job, of course, much easier. It's a good thing to be at the end of a speaker's list and be able to refer to the really excellent presentations of Dr. Shiva Olyaei and Dr. Hossein Renani. So thank you very much to both of my fellow presenters. What I want to talk about a bit more today is centering on the point that we are at today and where we go forward. Today, we're marking a ceasefire, which is long awaited and which comes with many different characterizations. A fragile ceasefire, of course, a ceasefire that's heavy with 2 years of genocide, death, and destruction. A ceasefire where people are returning to homes that are in rubble, a ceasefire that's already being violated, and a ceasefire that we don't trust Zionist Israel to respect. And I think also a ceasefire that we all know is one step in a long struggle for an end to the siege on Gaza, for the release of all 9,000 remaining prisoners, Palestinians held unjustly and illegally in Israeli prisons and torture camps, including children, and most importantly, the struggle for a Palestinian self-determination. But what I want to talk about regarding ceasefire is how this ceasefire is a historic victory for Palestine and a historic defeat for Zionist Israel and for the United States. First of all, this is a defeat for Zionist Israel because they failed in all of their declared goals in the last 2 years, including ethnic cleansing. And I'm not just saying this as my opinion, I'm saying this as the facts on the ground are telling us why this has been a devastating and crucial defeat for Israel. No matter what they like to say, what they like to claim, that is the truth. And in fact, it is also a tremendous victory for the Palestinians and the heroic Gazan people. And to remind ourselves of what Zionist Israel's initial goals were 2 years ago when they started this genocide. They said that they were going to, 1, eliminate Hamas as an entity, 2, to eliminate and neutralize Hamas leadership, 3, to eliminate and neutralize Palestinian resistance forces in Gaza and their command leadership, 4, to bring back authority and credibility to Netanyahu and to the Israeli army, and 5, to bring back the lost security and safety to Zionist Israel and to its people. None of this is achieved, none of it. The leadership of Hamas, despite some losses, is intact, negotiating, leading, and functioning, and in fact is stronger than before and is in complete control of Gaza. The Palestinian resistance movement is stronger and visible in Gaza, as we see in the media and on our screens. The security and safety of people in Israel is shaky, unstable, and people are leaving Israel in massive numbers, which we, of course, don't see reported on our mainstream media. The illusion that you can have safety on the occupation of another people's land has been shattered. And of course, the authority, the credibility, and the popularity of Netanyahu and Israel are at their lowest point worldwide. So that is the defeat, and now on to the victory. The victory for Palestinians is that millions, hundreds of millions of people worldwide have become their allies for self-determination. Millions of people for 2 years, every day, in 150 countries, in many different languages, have opposed the genocide of Palestinians carried out by Zionist Israel, by the United States and other imperialist backers. We have seen millions of people worldwide participating in the occupations of institutions, of industries, workplaces, educational institutions, airports, shipping ports, wherever they see a connection and work with Zionist Israel, these institutions have come under protest. Also, the movement to stop arming and to boycott Israel is rapidly growing and getting close to the point of no return, which reminds us of the successful boycott of apartheid South Africa 35 years ago. We have to sometimes take a step back from our screens, from our protests, and look around the world and recognize that there has never been in the history of humankind so many people, such millions of masses in motion for such a long, extended period of time opposing war and genocide. And that is because the Palestinian people, particularly those in Gaza, have become the leaders of the worldwide movement for humanity. This is why the victory of dignity, this is why it's a victory of dignity against oppression, against humiliation and inhumanity, against genocide, against apartheid, and against the Zionist Israeli regime. This is the biggest achievement and a lesson that we as people around the world have learned from Palestinians and from the Gazan people. Their heroic resistance, their resilience and steadfastness, despite only having empty hands, despite the raining of bombs and missiles, the destruction of their homes, this heroic resistance has made it possible to win this achievement of ceasefire and also the future achievement of future liberation and self-determination of Palestine. So this ceasefire today, as I said, it's a victory for Gaza and for Palestinians. And this victory of a steadfast fight for self-determination under genocide, under ethnic cleansing and starvation inflicted by the US-Israeli war machine, is that Palestinians have inspired the world as they've gone through unimaginable suffering. We've all seen the images, but what we've also seen is that in the last 2 years, Palestinians continue to amaze and inspire us. We see Palestinians studying and continuing their education under makeshift tarp classrooms. I just saw a video today of a Palestinian celebrating his marks in university that he's been doing completely online despite being under genocide. We see videos of children dancing the Debka in ruined streets, saying we continue to practice and honor our culture. We see Palestinians right now going back home to homes that they know are in ruins and doing the unimaginable, rebuilding where any of us might look and say that's impossible, but rebuilding, restoring, and then posting this transformation for all of us to see on social media, a transformation of rubble to repaired homes with immense pride, saying you can never take us from our land. As we see Palestinians celebrating in the streets today, we see that they're doing this, they're celebrating, even though they know that this is a fragile ceasefire. They know well, much better than any of us, that Israel has a record of violating and breaking ceasefires, knowing there's a long road of struggle for liberation for Palestine, knowing they've experienced incredible loss and devastation, but also knowing that their dignity and the dignity of all Palestinians is unbroken and respected the world over. So we as activists, and as the saying goes, in our thousands, in our millions, we are all Palestinians. We must count the Palestinian victory as a victory for all activists and really for all of humanity. For all of us that have protested in the millions on the side of justice in record-breaking demonstrations, for everyone that's come out to their protests, who've joined the flotillas that have bravely sailed towards Gaza, knowing they would be violently kidnapped and put in Israeli jails, for workers that have gone on strike, for those who have stood with Palestine when it meant facing arrest or police brutality and attacks on our human and democratic rights. This is our victory. This is also a victory for the people of Yemen, of Lebanon, and Iran, who have defended Palestine, who have been on the front of resistance, even when they knew that this meant facing the brutal attacks from the Zionist regime and US imperialists, even though they knew the heavy cost. In these 2 years, the Israeli Zionists and the United States, with the backing of Canada and especially the EU and other imperialists, they have committed genocide. We have to continue to hold them responsible for their war crimes and crimes against humanity, whether there's a ceasefire or not, whatever happens next, they are guilty. So as we mark this ceasefire, we have to keep fighting, we have to keep moving forward, and we have to keep honoring the martyrs of Palestine. It's now estimated over 680,000 lives have been lost to the genocide by new estimates and as noted by Francesca Albanese in the United Nations. With our continued action for Palestine, we honor all of these people and the 20,000 children who have been killed by official statistics, although we know this number is much higher, the countless children that have been left orphaned, the mothers and fathers, aunts and uncles, brothers and sisters, the healthcare workers, the journalists, and the rescue workers who have been martyred, and those who have survived, who are really the true heroes of Palestine and Gaza. And by doing this, we have to say, and we have to take these moments like this webinar today to assess, to look at our movement and think about what is our perspective after 2 years of genocide in this new dynamic of a ceasefire. What is our next steps? So I think first of all, we have to recognize that today is just really one step forward in an ongoing struggle for Palestinian self-determination. Today should give us more of a boost, more of a push to say we are on the winning side, we are standing for justice and humanity, and we can and we will win. And so it's not a time for us to slow down, but to multiply our efforts in solidarity with Palestine to keep that pressure on US imperialists and the Zionist Israeli regime. And we have to remember, of course, that the United States and their imperialist backers will not stop unless they achieve their goal of destroying and fracturing Iran. I think our last presentation helped to set the stage of just how long the United States imperialists and other imperialist powers have recognized that Iran is a critical point and center of political and strategic gravity in West Asia and North Africa. They understand, the imperialists and our enemies understand that Iran is the most powerful country in West Asia and the most supportive of Palestinians, particularly in Gaza. Iran has become more significant in the whole region because it is the only country resisting also imperialists and Israel. And we have to remember, as we saw in the previous presentation, that the Iranian Revolution of 1979 changed the relationship of and balance of forces in West Asia and in North Africa. Without attacking Iran and destroying it as it is today, a powerful, independent, and anti-imperialist power, these imperialist powers, led by the United States, cannot bring back its complete imperialist hegemony in the whole of West Asia, South Asia, and Africa, which really we have to understand and step back that this is their goal. Fighting against Palestine, dominating or trying to dominate Palestine is one section of their attack against oppressed nations in West Asia. But the key really is to attack and bring down Iran, which as people around the world must not let happen. So I think we have to really recognize that this is an important understanding that the anti-war movement must have. We have to understand, we have to arm ourselves with the understanding of what our enemies are planning, what is their long-term strategy, and we have to combine the Palestinian struggle with the Iranian struggle for independence and sovereignty. And we have to continue to stand by all the forces that are resisting US imperialism in the region, including Lebanon, including Yemen, and including Iran. So now more than ever, I think it's time that we intensify our work in solidarity with Palestine. We've come off of 2 weeks in Metro Vancouver United for Palestine, and ceasefire or not, today Palestinians in Gaza are continuing to live under genocide, siege, and face famine and starvation. Palestinians in the West Bank continue to face constant attacks, destruction, displacement, and Zionist settlements. There are still more than 9,000 Palestinian prisoners illegally and unjustly held in Israeli Zionist prisons. So we have to think of what we could do next. First of all, I think we need to amplify our call for more peace-loving and justice-minded people to get involved, to organize, to mobilize, and to join in building an international movement against war and genocide. When we started this movement, which, you know, for many of us, organizing against war and occupation and part of the anti-war movement, we saw this explosion of people coming out onto the streets after October 7th, 2023. We saw this massive, spontaneous movement against genocide come out and grow over the last 2 years. But it's our challenge to continue growing this, to continue building the momentum, and to understand that we have to build really a mass movement. That's our most important contribution to the struggle for Palestine and against war in Iran and the entire region. As Dr. Shiva noted, we are one front in this struggle, and that is our responsibility is building a mass movement. Part of that, I think, is coordinating our efforts worldwide to join with others around the world and to build a united front for groups to hold coordinated days of action, to agree on common demands, and to come together in whatever way we can, understanding that we can and will win. And one important proposal that I think would help advance our movement is to organize an international tribunal on Israel's genocide in Gaza. In other terms, an independent public inquiry. We know that the institutions which claim to defend human rights and international law, the United Nations, the International Criminal Court, the International Court of Justice, are not doing what they claim to uphold as they drag their feet and make statements of genocide 2 years too late. But it has been people on the streets that have claimed the moral authority, and they have called a genocide a genocide. So we have to keep exercising that we are the voice of humanity and justice. So I think that's maybe a good place to end my presentation. I think most of all, let's continue to unite. Let's continue to come together. I encourage people to join us every Saturday in Vancouver, if you are in Vancouver, or wherever you are. I know there's people from many different cities on with us today that are part of demonstrations in their own cities. But let's continue uniting to demand an end to the Zionist Israeli occupation, an end to the siege on Gaza. Let's demand justice and freedom for all Palestinians and self-determination for Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. Thank you. It was a very nice presentation, and thank you so much for sharing that grounded, organizing-based perspective, and for reminding us how imperialism connects us to daily struggle for some people around the world. Your words really bring it back to what we can do collectively, which is such an important note to end this talks on. Moving forward, I would like to remind everyone, as Janine mentioned, that the efforts that we are doing hasn't ended yet. We have to keep collecting, we have to keep gathering and raise our voice for Palestine. From MVUP, from Metro Vancouver United for Palestine, we are organizing rallies for Palestine every Saturday at the Vancouver Art Gallery. This coming Saturday, October 18th, at the Art Gallery, we are starting at 12 p.m., where we will start with the art and awareness display. And from 2 p.m., we will have our rally and the speakers and the march. And I invite you, all of you, to come raise our voice for Palestine. Let's all keep collecting and take a stand and raise our voice for all the people that are oppressed in the world. In Palestine, in Yemen, in Iran, let's all keep collecting. And please follow us online on our social media platforms. We are on Instagram, Twitter, TikTok by the username MVU Palestine. Moving forward, we will be taking some questions. So far, we have one question. If any one of you would like to ask any question, please use the Q&A box, which is at the bottom of your screen. Please post any questions so I can read it out for our speakers, and they will be happy to answer your questions. So far, I have one question. If any of our speakers would like to take this question is from Anthony Albania. So his question is, why is it as human beings, we have been given a choice to use as the cycle of violence to get something what we want? Why instead of love and share, why do we choose to hate? Speakers, I would like you to please address the question.
I have some thoughts on it. I know that I feel that Dr. Shiva would probably give a very good answer to this if she is available. So I'll let others go first, otherwise I'll respond.
Yeah, thank you so much. I would say, unfortunately, that's the human nature. We have those both sides. According to Hobbes, we're human wolves if we wanted to start from a very non-religious perspective. So the world might turn into a jungle if we don't leash what we're asking, what we wanted to do. So we should put ourselves on leash sometimes that side that is more inclined towards being a wolf rather than the other side that needs to be cherished. That side is our humane side. So maybe instead of asking, at first I started to ask, maybe I have to ask our creators, but then I appreciate the choice that we were given by our creators. If we believe that we have a creator, that we have the freedom and choice, therefore I will address that questions to ourselves. Why do we choose? Instead of asking why we have been given a choice. So then the next question would be, why do we choose? And that is the main question for me every day. In every question, we allow ourselves to start to pause and ask this question. So that was my methodological approach to this question.
I could answer also on that. I sometimes, when we are tabling or handing out information for Palestine or other anti-war issues, I'll have someone come up to the table and say, well, we can't do anything about war. It's in our human nature to kill and hate and hurt people. And so my way of sometimes flipping the question is asking, well, do you enjoy hurting people? Do you enjoy killing people? And that person will say, well, no, not me. And that I think in that simple question just kind of proves that I think as human beings, we want to live in peace. We want to live in community, which unfortunately our North American society has really destroyed a sense of community and has really isolated and alienated people. So I think we also have to recognize that we're living under societies that are anti-human. We're living under societies that have told us to hate the other. Have told us that we're different and that we shouldn't care about each other. But I think that is part of what makes us human, is to be connected with each other. And I think what we're seeing on the streets and what we should draw inspiration from is, as much as we've been told to hate or to see someone that we've never met or speaks a different language or has a different religion as us, to other them, we're seeing people come onto the streets and in every language say, I'm Palestinian. And in every language or every religion say, I stand for free Palestine. People who didn't even know what Palestine was 2 years ago, but because they know that it's a cause of justice and humanity. So I think what we're seeing when we go out into the streets, when you look at people around you, maybe just think that, you know what, this is what humanity really is. This is what we're meant to be. And I think this is Palestine is not just a struggle for Palestine, but it's really a struggle for all of our humanity.
And maybe I also add a bit of a philosophy to this philosophical question. So from a Zoroastrian perspective, one of the fundamentals in that worldview was the eternal battle between good and evil. And I think we have learned over the past millennium that that's true. And also in various Abrahamic religions, we know that our Creator has given us free will and has given us the option to choose good or evil. And that is really what makes us human, to have this power to choose. And we know there are those who are driven by greed and hate. And they do evil, and on the other side, there is the option to be driven by justice, freedom, and love, and oppose those who are driven by greed and hate, and protect the oppressed. And the third option is to be passive and not do anything. And as a famous quote goes, if you choose to not act in situations of justice and not take side, you have already taken the side of the oppressor. So in my view, whenever we take action, it is out of love for every human being, for every Palestinian child. I have full confidence that every resistant fighter who is fighting these Israeli terrorists or other mercenaries from the Western regimes are driven by love of their children, of their mothers, fathers, sisters, brothers. And we have to be very clear the difference between fighting the evil and also being driven by love.
Thank you so much, all of our speakers, for addressing the question so nicely, so perfectly. I have next question now for you all. I have a question from Mohammed Deeb and an anonymous participant. So the question is, how can we continue the fight against imperialist propaganda, especially after the ceasefire has been declared? And also, if you can add some more information on Canada's complicity in funding and arming Israel.
So I think my view on that question is if you look at our posters for our weekly rallies, we tend to have a lot of demands, probably too many to include on a poster, but it's because we really feel that it's necessary to be clear about what we're demanding. We could just, have one demand, stand with Palestine. Those are great. I have nothing against that, but I think we're always think it's very important to have concretely what we're demanding. End to the siege. We're demanding, we're adding the demand that became popular in January of this year, ceasefire today, liberation tomorrow, to keep people moving forward. A demand of hands off Iran to remind people that this is a regional struggle that is also attacking Iran. So I think that's part of our job as activists and organizers to make sure that we are bringing the politics to our actions. Today is a great opportunity to have those sorts of discussions, and then we can carry that back into our work on the streets. The fact that we're handing out brochures and information, that we have an info table where people can come and talk to organizers and get information. Of course, we don't have the imperialist propaganda machines, but we have our message, our voice, and we have the truth. So we have to really push hard against the attempts to slow us down and keep focused on what our demands are. And I think importantly, as the question asked about Canada's complicity in funding and arming Israel, I think as people here living in Canada, we have to, as much as we're holding the United States complicit in their very huge role in genocide, we have to put the focus also on Canada. And actually, if you've been to a rally and march with Metro Vancouver United for Palestine, you know that as we're walking through the streets, as we're marching, we'll stop as we go if there's a crowd of people on the sidewalk, and we'll say, this is why we're coming out. This is why we're here. We appeal, we encourage people to join us. But we also, any chance we can, we're letting people know and saying, as we're coming out today, the government of Canada is continuing to support a genocide. Your taxpayer dollars are being spent on weapons that continue to be sent to Israel. So we need to keep letting people know, because I don't think people know enough, and I think people would oppose it. So that's one aspect I wanted to add.
Yeah. Maybe I add a little bit in terms of what constitutes Canadian complicity in this Israeli genocide, and also before that, we have reports of arms shipments from Canada going directly or indirectly through the US to find their ways into Israel to slaughter Palestinians and other peoples of West Asia. So that's a very clear way. But Canadian complicity is really multifaceted, and pretty much in every way that the Canadian government has been able to support this genocidal regime, they have done it. So it's either in terms of buying and selling military equipment, components, technology, and services, also in terms of providing political support. Domestically inside Canada, every single politician who has ever shaken hand with any Israeli war criminal or any lobby or spy agency, for example, CIJA, which is equivalent of APAC, but in Canada, they must be shamed to their last day on this earth. In terms of propaganda in state media, you see always a one-sided situation and essentially a reversal of reality, depicting the victims of genocide as aggressors and those who are committing genocide as lovely, cute, nice little people. The propaganda goes into our public schools. You see CIJA influence, Israeli lobby, and others doing their best to spread anti-Palestinian Islamophobic messages in public schools, and also spread a message of pro-Israeli apartheid and genocide in our schools. There are so many ways in which we are supporting, our government is supporting this genocidal project. And last but not least, with our tax dollars, a lot of that goes directly or indirectly to the genocidal apartheid regime of Israel, whether it's through our pension funds, which have stocks in Israeli companies directly or indirectly, or through many Zionist charities, which have grown like a wild mushroom in every Canadian city under the guise of fighting anti-Semitism, or just being a Jewish Federation of Canada in this city, or just being lobby, or some of them journalistic outfits like Honest Reporting Canada and many others. They are really extracting millions and millions and millions of dollars from Canadian tax dollars. And I know for most Canadians, what moves them the most are dollars and cents, not human life, unfortunately. And that's the reality in most capitalistic systems. And I think not enough Canadians know how much of their money is being funneled to this genocidal terrorist regime. And we as Canadians have to spread awareness on all of these various aspects of Canadian complicity in this genocidal project, and every day be committed to doing whatever we can on whatever front we can. And this genocide is not over. But even if the genocide is over, the apartheid is not over. You know, years before, Eve England wrote a book called Canada and Israel Building Apartheid Together. So we still have the apartheid. We still have hundreds of Palestinian children in Israeli torture dungeons. And every day that they are there, our work is not finished. We have over 10,000 Palestinian hostages in Israeli torture dungeons. There, we have to bring them home. We have to dismantle this genocidal apartheid regime. And until that's done and Palestine is free from the river to the sea, our job is not over unless and until every war criminal who has slaughtered Hind Rajab, Fatima Hassouna, and thousands of others is roaming free on this earth. Our job is not over. We have to eradicate evil, and we have to make sure that justice and accountability prevails.
Maybe I touch upon the question regarding the Canadian youth. So I think we recently have released the first ever Canadian youth policy. And that, I believe, can be a turning point for the Canadian youth. They're going to universities and they will learn about youth rights, human rights, Indigenous rights, children's rights, housing rights, labor rights, employment rights, education rights, disability rights. Then that's the turning point for them to understand their collective power. And that collective power help them to join much larger local, national, and global movements. That's the time that our students were given the tools in order to connect the dots. So it is them that will understand that, for example, being an environmentalist or someone who is pushing for sustainable development is not just about preserving our biodiversity or reducing our emission, but to fight against the systems that perpetuate extraction and exploitations of many nations. That's the time that we equip our students to connect the dots to understand how green colonialism is a thing, to understand that why they receive a sugar package for $5 here. Who paid for it? Child slavery in South America. So once they were given tools, they are able to connect the dots. And once they gained this knowledge, constructed their own meaning out of the information and references they were given, then that's the time that they will face Palestine in a much newer light.
Thank you so much, Dr. Shiva, for addressing the question. Dr. Shiva, Dr. Hossein, and Janine, thank you so much. Let's start wrapping up with our last two questions we have. So first question here we have is, we have been fighting the occupation and imperialism for more than 100 years. We fight it from too many angles. Yes, it's effective, but why don't we think of uniting powers and think bigger perhaps? And also if you can combine this question with, how do we tell our Canadian government that we don't want our taxes to support the genocide of Palestinians?
I don't want to go to that idealist direction to give advice to the government. I have to take a very realist stance here. And I know that Canada had the luxury of sleeping under the warm blanket of the United States. And it's the extension of the foreign policy of the United States and sometimes the UK. So I would say that we can push, we can continue to demand, but there's a deep state very much committed to the continuous colonialism. So I don't want to give myself a hope that we might be able to change the deep state. The world is changing. The World War III has already started. And I'm seeing that Canada is siding by the European Union, which itself is drowning because it was too much dependent on the United States after Marshall programs, after World War II. So I would recommend Canada to move away from its legacy allyships and allies. Look at the world with fresh new perspective. The same recommendation also goes to European Union. I would say make new allyship. Look at the world, especially the countries of Global South, with respect. This country is believing in a policy called multiculturalism. And that will put a heavy responsibility on the shoulder of Canada. We can no longer continue with this demography and population to be that same colonial power. So major changes is needed, even for the survival and war preparedness of Canada. I would say that Canada can be easily occupied by the southern neighbor, since basically 90% of its population are living within the 100 miles of the border. And Trump wanted to have access to the Northern Arctic corridor. So I would, to facilitate its trades with Russia and with China, because these countries are based in marine corridors. That's why their main goal is to choke us in our road-based corridors, especially the Silk Road. So, and also the both Belt and Road projects of China, which is the revival of the Silk Road. So I would definitely tell Canada and recommend it to reconsider its colonial legacy. We can't continue in the same path that we used to go on and remained unchallenged. So definitely retry to see the world in another light.
And to elaborate on what Dr. Olyaei mentioned, we have to be aware of Canada's colonial heritage and past. You know, we are still essentially, fundamentally a British colony. Canadians, even though they pay millions of dollars to buy 7-year-old wooden houses, they can't own the land. The land still belongs to the British monarchy. Canadians should really start learning and waking up from this propaganda and demand an independent governance from the United States, and something which is driven by the best interest of people who live here and pay taxes here. And if enough people stand up, learn the truth, and start acting and demanding, I think change is possible, but I don't think it's going to be something that can be done by activities around the margins. It would require a mass mobilization and something close to a mass uprising. And it is hard for me to see that in the near future, because people are really entertained by whatever is around them. People are really enslaved by their 8-to-5 jobs and 30-year-old mortgages and the hassles of everyday life, that it's difficult to also wake them up from this reality and to move them in any specific direction. But I think that's what it takes to change course for a colonial project and government like Canada.
So just for my wrap up and to respond a little bit to the questions and to wrap up, I think the really excellent question that was put was on fighting imperialism and occupation being a long struggle that maybe we need to think of uniting more. And I think we're definitely on the same track there. When Metro Vancouver United for Palestine came together about a year ago, that is why our name has the word united in it, because we felt that this is really a critical way that we can move forward is by having a united front, organizing together with people that maybe we don't agree on everything with, and that is fine. Right now, we can unite against the genocide. We can unite for the self-determination of Palestine. And that unity is what really makes us powerful. When we see the huge, I think we've been really woken up also by Italy and Spain and Amsterdam and countries that have come out in huge numbers and even had strikes for Palestine. And we have to remember that didn't just happen overnight. That happened from organizations coming together. It happened from groups saying, okay, we need to unite on organizing together, unite on common demands, unite on days of action, and work together. So I think that I absolutely agree with the question about unity being a really critical cornerstone to our work, both for Palestine, for Iran, and for any social justice cause. We are basically told by the powers that be, by our enemies, by the imperialist powers, to be divided. And the Palestinian movement, I think, is so inspirational because it has united people across so many different lines. So we have to keep organizing together, keep coming out together, keep fighting against the siege on Gaza, against the occupation of Palestine, and for a free Palestine. And I encourage people to join us on Saturdays at the Vancouver Art Gallery. I know maybe we can put the poster up again before we wrap up here. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today.
Thank you so much for all of the speakers for coming here, joining this webinar, contributing, and making this webinar successful. I'm sure all of us have learned a lot, and you have encouraged all of us to take a stand, raise our voice for Palestine. Today, when we leave this webinar, let's all of us promise that we use all of the social media platforms we have to increase the awareness, to raise education about Palestine, and let's gather more and more in numbers to take a stand for Palestine. Free Palestine, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Have a
Free
good
Palestine. Thank you.
Thank you.